Talk to you.
It's always great to come to these reunions, and the energy is contagious. So thanks, first of all, for being here, because without you, we would not have these. So I just want to do a quick check. How many of you, raise your hand if it's the first time you've come to a reunion? Excellent. That's great. Well, welcome. Great. You got a full few days in store. We're going to move into the dinner and then the program. So really the reunion is this time out of your normal life to kind of just recenter, meet some new people, reconnect with some old friends, and kind of rejuvenate your spirit, because everybody in this room is extremely blessed. Some days we forget that. But I think most people today had breakfast and slept with a roof over their head and are having a beautiful dinner together, right? And that's not everybody's life, is it? So there's a scripture that guides me every day when I think maybe I need to do a bit more, is to whom much is given, much is required. So do remember to count our blessings, much is given. And in today's world, I think we are all being asked to do more, okay? Because our world needs what is in this room, which is very caring people with a lot of intelligence, a lot of ability to get results, and a lot of ability to bring great principles to every neighborhood in this world, okay? That's the Procter & Gamble way. So as you enjoy dinner tonight, please make everybody feel welcome. You know, it's not always easy to do dinner parties, etc. So in the P&G family and extended family, everybody please make sure to reach out so everybody has a wonderful experience, because we don't really know what everybody went through, do we, today or yesterday? But we are here together tonight, and we'll have the starter, and then I'll give you a little bit of background on the Women's Forum. And then when dessert is served, we'll do the program this evening with Miss Francie Pepper and myself, talking a bit about legacy and joy, okay? If you have any questions on the forum, Uta Hagen, right here, is one of the co-chairs. Myself, Luann Eckerd-Lynch, and Dorothy O'Brien, right here. Just ask one of us and we'll take care of you, okay? I do want to put in a commercial for Reflections taping. There's a video process where tomorrow there's a room, where's Ed? Mont Blanc room. If you go in there, there's some reflective questions that are asked of you, and we're trying to record an oral history of some of the essence and soul of the company and the people of the company and the extended family. So do stop in and do that. The steering team will give you a lot more information, but you know, you are part of a very important legacy, and it's important we capture that, and Reflections is one of the ways that the alumni group is trying to do that. So please stop in and share your reflections. Your voice matters, and we'd like to hear it, okay? So I'd like to just say, to respect everybody's choice, just a quick maybe blessing or gathering, and to just put good energy out in the world while we take nourishment and get ready for a wonderful few days, okay? So enjoy your meal, and more to come. Thank you. I came into the table tonight, you know, pretty pumped on sharing, and then I sat next to Francie Pepper for the last hour and a half, and I really need to go home and do more work now, because because I listened to her and John's legacy, just pieces of it, and you know, it's just inspiring, absolutely inspiring. And we were, you know, some of us talking too in the bathroom. There's not a week that goes by these days where we're not getting a wake-up call that something is wrong with humanity in our world. Louisa was sharing yesterday the tragic happenings in London, where people forget, like we're all in one family, and kill each other, right? And so we have absolutely insanity occurring, and we can look at it as, you know, the world's going to hell in a handbag, or it's a wake-up call. Okay, it's a wake-up call for us to evolve and bring more love than fear, and bring more solutions together to make some progress, and it's possible. So we're going to spend a little bit of time this evening sharing some personal journeys and insights. I met Francie Pepper and John Pepper in 1987. I was a team manager at Lima, Ohio, and we went to a leadership and mastery class together. And these two amazing people were in there having deep conversations about how do they solve world peace, how do they have a great marriage, raise wonderful kids for the next generation, etc. And tons of energy to always listen, to always be fully present in every conversation with every person, and remember it 30 years later, okay? So that's the kind of standard bearers that we've been blessed, many of us, to be in affiliation with in the institutions and the relationships that we've had through Procter & Gamble. So Francie's gonna start and share from her heart just some stories on joy and legacy, and then I'll come back up and we'll have a bit of time to ask some questions if you want, and then we'll migrate to sleep and refresh, and we'll start tomorrow at 8:15 in the main room, okay? And there'll be breakfast, there's coffee, not breakfast, coffee before, okay? So Miss Francie Pepper.
Hi, everybody. This is not the audience I expected, so I've had to change everything I was going to say while I'm sitting here. I expected all women. I've talked to all women before many, many times about the women's issues, and I'm delighted to have all the men here because it's time you all learned about what we women need you to know. But I want to back up a little bit because I grew up in Cincinnati, which you may or may not know, and I grew up with Procter & Gamble. In fact, my grandmother went to school with Mrs. Procter, but my grandmother was from the wrong side of the tracks and couldn't keep up with the tips, and they ended up in the same nursing home together, and my parents had to move my grandmother because she still couldn't keep up with the tips. So that's the Procter & Gamble. You can't grow up in Cincinnati and not be part of Procter & Gamble. My uncle was in Cuba with Procter & Gamble. He swam out as the Japanese invaded on the other side that was Cuba, Java. He was in Java, Indonesia, and he swam out as the Japanese invaded. Then they sent him to Cuba. He was the last American in Cuba. He came out with Procter & Gamble's money sewn in his pockets, and then P&G didn't know what to do with him, and they gave him early retirement. And my Procter & Gamble story is, actually, I came back to Cincinnati after college and secretarial school, which is what one did in 1962. I came back in 63 and got my first job. Mr. Chase was the executive vice president of Procter & Gamble. His daughter was a really good friend of mine. We went to his house for dinner. He said, "And why didn't you join Procter & Gamble?" And I said, "Because they put the women in the basement with the spiders." So that was my perception of Procter & Gamble for women. And I'm delighted that you all, women, have part of Procter & Gamble. And my husband actually had a lot to do with that, as you may know. And I know that you would rather be listening to him, and you don't know how you got me. But, oh well, that's the way. Sometimes it works. And then Denise, works on people, and she said, we got to do this Thursday night instead of Friday. I'm not sure what day it is. We got here this afternoon. Anyway, a little bit about me. I have one husband, 4 kids, 3 in-law spouses, and 1 about to get married in June, 6 grandkids, and another one on the way in August. So we're multiplying pretty quickly. And it takes a lot more work than I thought I'd have to do. Because once John sort of settled down and we got back to Cincinnati after tours of duty in Italy and twice in Belgium, I decided to do my life, which is what I've been doing ever since. And I guess that's why I'm standing here, Denise, right? One thing, going back, I think you have to think in women, but it also applies to men. You never know what you're going to learn from whatever you do. So you take advantage of everything you see and everything you hear, because someday it might come back. And that's one of the lessons that I think both John and I have learned. Don't just be one-sided, just do your business, or just do your children, or just do your business and your children and nothing else. Pay attention to what is going on in the world, because if you do, you'll find something that will really excite you, and you might be able to make a difference. And John and I have both been blessed because we have been able to do some of those things. Many, many years ago, 1963, and before I knew John even, I started working with a young girl in a home for pre-delinquent girls. And I went several times a week after work. And I should tell you, I worked for an international company. I was a secretary, legal secretary. Today you'd call me a paralegal. And I actually went in 1965 as interpreter for contract negotiations in Spain. I didn't know women didn't travel with their companies then. I'll explain that later. Women didn't do that. I did it, but I didn't know I shouldn't have done it. But it was great. I worked with a young girl, and she really made a difference. She went from just being a slob to passing her, doing very well in school. Her interest was Spanish. I was a Spanish major, so that's how we connected. One afternoon, a group of boys came in to the living room of this house for pre-delinquent girls and beat up a little girl in the living room. And my little girl said, "Don't worry about it. That's her boyfriend. He owns her." I was 21. I wasn't the big mother that I am today. And I said that day, someday I'm going to grow up and I'm going to do something about domestic violence that didn't have a name in those days. 1963, 64, there was no name for domestic violence. Life went on. I married John Pepper. We moved to Europe with 3 babies, came back, went back, did all of that. And all the time I was doing schools, 25 years of schools with 15 schools, 4 kids, and I also had 7 exchange students, 3 extra kids. I even have one living with us now, and I had an extra one the other night. Cheapest bed and breakfast in town, Cincinnati, Ohio. Right, John? John never knows what he's going to find out when he comes home. There's always somebody there. He cooks dinner, too. He never knows how many he's going to have. But anyway, we came back, and my youngest child went off to, and then I had all of P&G stuff to do for John, dinners to cook and, all that stuff. And then when my youngest child went away went to college, I thought, what am I going to do now? John said schools. I said, no schools. Done that, been there. I'm going to take care of the mothers because they're the first line of defense for the kids. And it was just by total coincidence that the YWCA of Cincinnati called me and asked me to do their capital campaign. And we raised $7.5 million for a battered women's shelter and rehab of the downtown location. And what's so amazing is that I grew up with the YWCA. I grew up in that YWCA. My mother grew up in the YWCA in New York City. My great aunt was, I'm talking legacy now. My great aunt was one of the leaders of the YWCA of the USA back in the early 1900s, and her sister was the first woman appointed commissioner of New York City. So I'm not creating a legacy, I'm actually carrying on the legacy, and even their grandmother was from Seneca Falls and involved in women getting the vote. So there's a legacy that carries on, and if you pay attention, I didn't know any of that at the time I started doing the campaign for the YWCA. So it's funny. The other thing that you have to pay attention to is, okay, go back to mentoring. I'm skipping around here a little. Go back to mentoring. John didn't know about mentoring. So when we came back to Cincinnati, he started the Cincinnati Youth Collaborative, which now today, 25 years later, mentors over 2,000 kids every year. And I work there full time as a volunteer doing all their finances the first 5 years. So we've been able to do that. There was another, Phyllis Smale comes into this, and you all remember Phyllis. I think I'm up here because I'm the oldest in the room. Except for John. But, so everybody remembers, I don't know if you remember Phyllis Smale, but when we were doing the renovation of the YWCA, she sent me a book about childhood brains. And we weren't ready for anything like that. Yeah, we were still raising the money to do the thing. So I put the book on John's desk, and I said, Phyllis Mail sent this book to you, John. And he read it, and the rest is history. He got people in Cincinnati to start something called Every Child Succeeds, which is nationally known. It's been on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. It goes into homes. It has nurses and people trained to go into homes to work with pregnant girls, teaching them about what's going to happen, how to take care of a baby, and takes them from pre-birth to 3 years old. And then they go into what we have in the United States called Head Start, and then on and on. But they get that first initial introduction because of Every Child Succeeds, which comes from a book. And that's why I'm telling you the story, because all these little things just come back one way or another. If you pay attention and you wait long enough, there is room for you to do something that will spark your interest. It's so important, and you have to see it. You can't just say, oh, well, that's there and I can't do anything about it. You might have to wait 50 years, but it's there, and this world needs it. Now, let me talk about women. Women today, through social media and the internet and all the other ways that we learn about things today, there is no one who should not know what is happening to women around the world at this time. Women are being raped in incredible numbers. We didn't know that. I'm sure it's been going on forever, but we didn't know that. 70% of women in many countries are raped or abused. 87% of women in Afghanistan, for instance, say that they are frequently, repeatedly abused, beaten up, whatever. You read about it in the paper, but you gloss over it because it's not nice. Well, it's not nice, but we all have the wherewithal to do something around the world with that. P&G has their water program. That's going to help a lot because that helps women. But we need to understand the violence. And it's horrible, and it's everywhere. It's in your neighborhood. It's maybe in your families. I don't go anywhere and talk about domestic violence that I don't have somebody mention it. I was with a young woman the other night from Lebanon who was very badly abused by her husband, who brought her to the United States when she was 19. And she managed to escape. That's the good news, and that is the joy when you see someone who overcomes it. I'm working with a 14-year-old who had a baby in the toilet, believe it or not. You don't want to hear these stories, but they're there, and they're everywhere. And if you pay attention, you will know about them. And you have to get your hands dirty. You have to get in and really do something about it. We are an international company, international people who've left, you're everything. But we have the opportunity in this circle of P&G and former P&G and P&G alumni to do something really major around the world in violence against women. We're going backwards. At least in the United States, we're going backwards. There's an awful lot going on where they're trying to defund Planned Parenthood, which doesn't just do abortions, 3%. 97% is medical exams for women. And they're trying to defund it. They're trying to take away birth control pills in some places. They're closing down all kinds of things. They're trying to fool women. So, and I'm sure I can't speak for all of the world, but I do enough. So that, I'm going to give a little commercial here. Am I up 10 minutes? I got 10 minutes. The book that I would suggest everybody read is Half the Sky. Women Are Half the Sky. And this is by Nicholas Kristof. He's traveled all over the world, and he goes into some of the most difficult places. He actually bought 2 prostitutes out of prostitution. One went back. But in, where was that? In Thailand? In Thailand, I think. Read this book to get an idea of what's out there. Because if you do, you will understand what we need to do. in our privileged lives. That's about what I have to say. I had a couple. Oh, I don't know if you've. This is fun too. Has everybody read this? Have you heard about this book? This is Sheryl Sandberg is with Facebook, and she's written this book about women leaning in, and don't let anybody run over you. Is essentially that. There's a lot about this book, but that's a good one. Half the Sky's the one that'll tell you about the violence. But the gist of it is you have to get your hands dirty. You can't just stand by, go to meetings. Who was it that you told me to quote about not getting you? You told me to somebody. Wait a minute.
She was a State Department official commenting on Bosnia.
State Department official commenting on Bosnia, and she said, and he loves her, another one, he loves women. If you want to take ownership of an issue, you have to do more than hold meetings. And I think that says it all. So thank you and I had Leo Burnett here. I thought that was a good one because you all are agencies and things like that. Leo Burnett, who's established the Burnett Agency, says if you have the facts on your side, can't read my writing.
And commitment in your heart.
And commitment in your heart. That's because I wrote it on the plane. I can't read it. Anyway, thank you very much, and you can talk to John tomorrow. Thank you.
Francie is the first generation of women that showed up really in mass for feminism to start happening. This past week, I was coaching 2 of my legislative interns on getting jobs. They just got their master's degrees. And they don't know our history as women. They do not know the realities of women's lives, okay? So, my job is to mentor them. My job is to expose them. And that's more important than having a meeting on something else. And so it's really important we go back to our history. We understand the legacies of the previous generations and the work that's done. And that we see the work is far from done, and at any age we can make a difference, and we really do need to step it up. Legacy and joy. Working at Procter & Gamble had an amazing time, and there's 4 men that I'd like to credit that really made a difference for global diversity and women's progress. John Pepper, Dick Antoine, Dimitri Panatopoulos, and Bob McDonald. Okay, those 4 gentlemen, their whole career, listened, figured it out. They've got coaching from their partners, their wives, and they listened and respected the women they hired and wanted to lead the company. And that transformed Procter & Gamble. I can remember I was sitting in Dick's office when we were doing Women Supporting Women, and we wanted to scale that program. And at that time, that was probably 1991, Procter & Gamble had the best brain trust in the world and the best muscle to execute by far. What we had underdeveloped so far was the heart muscle. And what Dick and I chatted about is because women have been in general more socialized to show that side of their humanity and bring that forward, if we allowed that to come out in the company and fostered it, and then allowed the men into that space and invited them in and people supporting people, we could unleash the power of the heart in Procter & Gamble. And that transformation actually took hold. Today, you fast forward and there's this concept called love brands, powerful brands. What's that about? It's about connecting the power of love in a meaningful relationship in some exchange, whether it's a product, whether it's getting clean drinking water into communities, okay? That's what Procter & Gamble does. We sell a lot of products to pay the light bill, but we change communities. And there's no more important time than right now in this world to take it up a notch. It's nice to see the number of men in here. Many of the women we've had experiences growing change in partnership, particularly with some of the top leaders, to transform the company culture and then transform our lives and to go out into different neighborhoods post P&G. And it's interesting because at Procter & Gamble, we have such bench depth of talent. And when I left Procter, I went into a very different career path called politics in public service. I'm 53, and I did that at, I think, 49, because I was fed up with the condition of the United States. And I remember I was working in Russia, in Moscow, for Daniela Riccardi. And Candy, my partner, and I, my wife of 3 years and my partner of 28 years, we sat there in, thank you. It can work. And we just said we got to go home and work back on the United States, a kind of important country that does have some influence in the world. And one of the institutions that needed work clearly is government. And you talk about like stepping into a whole new field, you know, publicly, all right? And, you know, none of us really like to lose, okay? That's not who we hire. So we're out there to play to win, or at least play in the top 1 percentile of the markets, okay? Let's be clear. And so to go out there and have the courage to use the tools and equipping that I was given both through church, my family, and the company to bring that to public service. And people would look at me and say, you can't say those things. Like you care about God, or you care about loving your neighbor, or you give straight answers to a question, or you ask people what's their principles before we make a decision. Well, you can, and it works, and it transforms things. So, 3 years into a new career where I've learned probably more in the last 10 years than my previous 10, cultural change happens, and it happens with the same tools that we've used for years in Procter & Gamble. Strong vision that's bold enough to spend your life working on. I mean, we don't just go in and spend a few years there on things that may or may not make a difference. Generationally, that company has made a huge difference around the world and continues to. We were talking over dinner. John started the first business school in Russia while he was over there. That's oh, by the way, that wasn't in his core job description. And how many years later, he goes back to a reunion, and the seeds that were planted are making a better world in that neighborhood. Okay, so this is what we do, and this is what we need to continue to do. So bringing those things to different places, government, nonprofits, neighborhoods, we have forgotten how to be kind to each other, okay? To see each other in an elevator, to stop and hold the door for someone. I missed I was in session yesterday in the State House in Massachusetts, hopped the T to Logan Airport, and I missed my stop because I, was texting on something that needed to get done. And I got off with my bag that was like 34 pounds at the wrong station. And this guy came up and he says, may I help you carry your bag down like 2 flights of stairs? It was so nice. Generosity, kindness made the day, okay? Made the day. Helped me keep going, okay? And made us both have a better moment. How hard is that? It's not like there's a limit on how often we can smile at somebody or how we can help. Okay, so, a bit serious conversation, but you know what? The world needs it. And when you look at joy and legacy, I'd ask you before you go to bed tonight, and each night while you're here, what is the legacy you're working on? We were talking in the bathroom. One of the most important job, in my humble opinion, is being a great parent. Okay? Second is a teacher, whether you're in the school system or you're mentoring the next generation. Bless you. So think about what's your legacy. Is your legacy being a wonderful parent, an excellent sister, okay, good daughter, son, okay, and some other things. Like making systemic change where women aren't beaten in their home and nobody talks about it. In this job, it takes my breath away most weeks what people live in. We get called every day when folks are running out of fuel assistance, losing their homes, can't get childcare for their kids, okay, been beaten and raped, okay, or abused. And you go to a meeting and it'll say 1 in 4 girls, 1 in 6 boys have been sexually molested by the age of 10. It's an epidemic. Okay, that isn't talking about the weather. And yet we've kind of gone numb on some of that stuff. So we got to shake the dust back off, read some tough reading. I read in here on the Congo, in Iraq before I came down tonight, and I felt like throwing up, okay? The good news in that is my heart still works and I'm not disconnected, okay? The day we're disconnected from our hearts and we can look at that stuff and not let it get to us, we get a real problem, okay? So be in those tough emotions. They're healthy. Process them. Particularly one tool that's very effective is keeping good company to process. This is a group of good company, kindred spirits, similar exposure, and a ton of grooming on how to make change, how to live by principles, and get systemic change to happen. So keep good company in your diet so that you have the capability, right, to keep going forward and leaving a legacy. The joy piece sometimes is challenging. My wife, Candy, says, in this new job, you've become really serious and you have forgotten how to have fun because it's very difficult. You know, when you're looking at a 93-year-old woman and she's getting her house foreclosed on, and it's like, what do we do? How do we stop this? You know, how do we figure it out? And so Candy's absolutely right, though. If there isn't a balance there of counter energy, you know, I won't be able to go the distance. Each of us won't. So how do we bring that joy in? Some do it through exercise, spirituality, good company, accomplishment. You know, stop and smell the roses. When there is a success, savor it. Because we know in media and et cetera, we get about 20 to 1 of the bad news stories to every one good one. And they're out there, but we got to ferret those out. So as you go forward, look at tonight and as you go to bed, what's your legacy and how are you bringing joy in your days? And I'd ask you, in the last 24 hours, did you have joy and where did it come from? And did you even notice it? Okay? And second, did you make any dent on your legacy work? Okay? It can be as simple as I look at their legacy of a 40-how-many-year marriage? 46-year marriage. They prepare together on a plane coming over. John finishes Francie's sentences and vice versa. That's a legacy, okay? And there's still joy. John twinkles when he hears Francie talking, his eyes, right? And vice versa. That is doing the hard work, but doing it in a way, and particularly in a partnership, that allows the joy and the energy to go the distance for a marathon. So I'd ask you as you tuck yourself in tonight to think about in the last 24 hours your legacy and the joy that you had, and how can you do more of that. So, you know, I'll close with what I opened with, to whom much is given, much is required. Yeah, it's serious. Yeah, there's a lot of work to do. But a team of people with big hearts and a ton of will can move mountains, okay? Margaret Mead said something like, don't ever doubt the power of a small group of committed citizens to change the world. In fact, that's the only thing that ever has. So our world needs us, okay? You're very well equipped, and let's rock and roll together. Get a good night's sleep, and we'll start at 8:15 tomorrow, and thank you for being here.